beautiful people. It is Tuesday. You know what that means? It's another interview with Jess Day. We are just waiting for Jeff. There he is.
Hello.
What's up?
How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm great.
Cool. We got Tuesday interview with Jess. Do you know what else
Yes.
Tuesdays are?
Taco.
Yes. You know what I just had for dinner?
Tacos.
Oh, I did. It happened.
Hell yeah.
Yep. So we are here today to interview you, Jess.
Hmm.
And I'll introduce myself a little bit here, and then we'll roll right in. My name is Jeff Agostinelli. I am a purpose and productivity coach and host of the Next Level podcast. I'm going to weave a little bit of how I know you in here, Jess, too, and then we'll go
Excellent.
from there. So we met through a coaching program, and I've gotten to know Jess a good bit over the last few weeks-ish, right? Hasn't been that long. Oh my God, it feels like it's been so much longer. Wow. Okay, cool. And she's super awesome, number one. Number two, is that she possesses some qualities that I want to unpack today as far as like what I think it takes to really like take vulnerability to the next level, but also like not just be a coach, but like help people have that similar breakthrough, which I think is super cool. I've been in the coaching space for a long time. I say like 10 plus years, internally with other companies, helping build companies and in my own company as well. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Jess, and see how it unfolds.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
You're super welcome. Number one, um, I'm curious, like so you're the breakup to breakthrough coach, right?
Yes.
That's your jam. Like what excites you most about helping people in that transition? Because I'm just a little bit of context. So some of my story will come through in here as well. And I think that'll be an interesting correlation with yours as well, is that like I'm newly divorced. I'd say like about a month, separated 2.5 years. So like it was coming, but like the process of, I would say like individuation or like kind of becoming who you are after a breakup is a big deal. And um, it's a process, right? It's definitely a process, and I've got a little one running around the back. So, what what really motivates you, or like what inspires you to help people in that transition? Because it's kind of like coming into your own. You know what I mean? So it's like, what's your motivation for that? Like, what gets you jazzed about that?
Um, so a little bit about me is that I also am divorced. Hello. I have been divorced now for 3 years, and we were married for 3.5 and together for 5. So my experience with getting divorced was one of the most painful things that I had ever experienced. And I myself got a coach, counselor. She was kind of like a hybrid of both. Um, right after that, and I just actually was looking at my notebook from that time, and I saw her. I invested in myself for a year in that time, and the amount of things that I learned about myself and coming back to my own, and like really understanding that like I didn't love myself, and I didn't know the things that I wanted and liked in life. And like I had like career dreams and goals, but like everyday shit, I didn't know what I liked to do for fun or like what was it me versus what I was doing all these things for my partner. And not that my partner asked me to do them, it's just what the role I took on. Um, and so my personal journey through my breakup to the amount many breakthroughs that I had during that time was so imperative to where I am now as a human. And I know that um, we are not taught how to do this, right? the way that relationships work right now is a new concept for all of us, because relationships used to be like marriage was like an arranged thing and it was meant for survival purposes. We don't live in that space anymore where there's survival, but we kind of take into it still a survival mentality, and then no wonder they're not working, because we're trying to live this abundant life where we don't need to have survival skills, but we're taking in the mentality of survival into it. And so then we're not actually becoming our whole selves, and we're like melding into another person in a way that's not actually beneficial. And so as people are breaking away, they find themselves lost and alone because their whole world has just exploded, because the person they talk to all the time on the phone, text, everything is gone. And so their whole life, and maybe some of their friends, like they have the same group of friends, and now all of a sudden I don't know who I can talk to and who I can trust, because who knows what my partner, ex-partner was saying. Like all of that stuff is super messy and not anything that we've been taught to deal with. Like we get taught how to use our brains in school. We don't get taught about emotions. And so getting into a space where I'm a personal development junkie. So like that is what I have spent most of my life doing outside of all the other stuff that I do. Those are the books that I read and everything that I'm super keen on. And then going through my own journey, like all of that like fuels me up because I know how important it was for me. And so then to be able to share that and help people shortcut through the shit that I had to go through so they don't have to go through all of the same stuff, and to have like to be able to teach people those tools to be able to like learn what it is that they want, learn, oh my gosh, I don't love myself, how do I do that? Like giving people the tools to be able to do that, to become like this beautiful whole person, and to move through that grief, because that's what's happening too when you're in a breakup, is that you're grieving. There's a loss there, and like holding space for people to be able to grieve is important too. And so I feel like all of the things that I'm actually really good at kind of combine into this space. And so I just get really excited about holding people and then helping them so that they can fully expand into themselves.
Yeah. Jess, I'm curious, like, what do you think about the
Hi, Lauren.
transition? Hey, Lord, nice. What do you think about the transition, like when someone gets out of a long-term relationship, right? Like marriage, divorce, that kind of thing. What is your, how do you help coach your clients to make the right choice on how to enter into a new relationship? And when and
Mm-hmm.
if they do, depending on the time frame, how can they start to see maybe a red flag or even a yellow flag, right? Like a caution light saying there's still this unresolved thing that you may want to handle on your own before entering into this new partnership. Like what is that transition and re-engagement, not really engagement, but reacquainting with another individual? What does that look like?
So if I'm boiling down your question correctly, it's almost like understanding when I'm ready to go move on to dating again.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Obviously, like every single person is different, and there is no right or wrong way to grieve, and so everybody moves through that differently. Um, but one of the things that I love to teach um, my clients is like when their bodies feel a yes and a no, um, because a lot of times we'll come into a red flag in a relationship that's not necessarily about us, it's about the other person we're seeing, but we're like so desperate to want it to work, make it work, because connection, like we crave and love and want connection in our life, and so we have this dream in our minds about what we want, and so we disregard our body saying no, and but we do it subconsciously because we don't know that that's what's happening. So getting into our bodies to learn what a clear yes and no are really help move through to understanding the red flags you might see in another person. But then differentiating that between um, the red flags you're feeling, and then also coming back to yourself, like what is this a reflection of for me? What is this a mirror of for me? So I'm getting jealous. Why? What is that jealousy about? And digging into the deeper things of like, what is it that I really want? And again, learning your clear yes and no's is so important here, because um, I don't know about you, but I've noticed a lot of people, their definition of relationships have changed a lot. And so it's not just necessarily one person and one person monogamously being together. There's a lot of people who are okay with open relationships, or and those all look very different too. Like it could be just flirting, it could be having full on sex with other people, but you have to be clear about what it is that you want before you go into a relationship with someone else. Because if you're just conceding because the other person wants it that way, a later, like, that's going to come back out later on, and you're going to feel resentful and bitter because it's not actually what you want. So gaining clear yes and no about what you want and desire in a relationship is so key to moving into that dating world again.
Hmm. So would you say that's like not just requirements for a relationship, but even like something going along the lines of values, right? Like making sure that you have a values match with another individual. And I think one thing you said in there too, I just want to highlight. Um, it's almost like giving a part of yourself away, right? So it's like when you placate somebody or just like go along with it for the sake of going along with it or do it to make the other person happy. It makes me feel a little icky even just saying it. It's almost as if we give a part of ourselves away, right? Can you talk a little bit about how to, one, notice those clear, I know it's different for everybody, but maybe just some of the tactical side of noticing those clear yeses and nos on how to move forward. But also when we feel, because it's very visceral too. I'm reflecting on it. That's the distant look. Is like, okay, I know I've definitely felt that. Like, oh well, for instance, right? Like I didn't drink for 10 years basically. It's been at least 10 years, and for a year when I was married, I had this genius idea where I was like, wow, she really likes wine. Maybe if I started to have some wine here and there and drink with her, that it would be okay. It would make things better. We could relate better. Genius idea, Jeff. No, it wasn't a genius idea. So, anyways, I realized afterwards, like, wow, I can't do that because that's just not me. And I had to come to the realization that, like, wow, I had to retract that belief that I could actually do something by giving up a part of me and come back to my own values of what it means for me to not like be sober, but just to not have that substance in my life. So, like, what are some of the ways that, like, if we've gone past that line, how can we bring it back? And how can we, at the inception, understand what that clear yes and no actually looks and feels like?
Okay. So the clear yes and no, there's an exercise that I encourage people to do when they're learning about their yes and no and wanting. um, is very simple. You go on a walk. And as you're going on a walk, it is not a destination walk at all. You are not going somewhere specifically. It is just a meandering walk. And you are going and you're noticing when you want to move, turn right, when you want to turn left, when you want to move forward, when you want to stop, when you want to dance around, when you want to turn around. Like you notice what is happening in your body when you want to do those things. And you feel what that feels like in your body, because when you'll get a clearer sense of like, oh yes, I really want to go that way. Oh yes, I really want to stop and look at these flowers. Look at how beautiful they are. Oh no, I don't want to go over there. That smells bad. Like, you have an idea of what's going on in your body when you're learning about what you want. And it sounds like a simple exercise, but it's not for people like who don't know what they want. And I'm finding more and more there are so many people who don't have any clue what they want. And I'm myself that way. I found myself like that on a walk generally, even though I tell people to do this exercise all the time. I I don't know what I want to do or where I want to go. But playing with that is super important to be able to like understand what's that clear yes and no in our body. That's a simple exercise to start to learn to differentiate what that feels like. Because once you start noticing that, you'll be able to notice it in other things when you're having conversations with people and they're like, hey, we're going out Friday night. You want to come with us? And your body's saying no, but you're trying to say yes to placate them. There's something wrong there. It's like, okay, no, but why? So then you could drop in and figure out like, oh wow, I actually have a really hard week and I don't actually have time to do that. Let me check in with myself. And it's learning that process of being able to check in. And I forgot the second half of your question.
If we've crossed that line, how do we come back, right? Like if we've, if we've said yes, what's a strategic way or like, a way to be able to, come back to ourselves or like renegotiate or recommunicate?
Yeah. And it's as simple as communicating, right? So like we're gonna I fuck this up all the time. I will find out like I will say yes to things and then come back and be like, oh, that's actually not a really good thing. So I will depending on what it was, I prefer phone calls over texting, so I'll probably call the person. But like, hey, I messed up. Like I really thought I had enough time to do this. I actually don't, or I don't actually feel comfortable doing this and this is why, and just like coming back to the conversation with vulnerability and honesty and saying what it is that I need and want, and then having a conversation around that, depending on what it is, obviously.
Yeah, nice. You know, it's funny when you're talking about those walks. I think they're challenging for folks who don't know what they want, but they're also challenging for people who are like constantly watching the clock or destination driven. Like
Mm,
that's me, right? So it's like I've had to train myself to go on those meanderings. I think it's the same lot of us that also have to adhere to a very particular schedule as well. And veering off is almost like, well, where am I without this container, without this like bound environment? So, you know, it's really neat too because it really allows you to hear those inner promptings though, right? Like to clearly differentiate between like, oh, go this way, do that thing. So that's so useful. What
I
about
have
like, yeah, go ahead.
I have a beautiful story that actually depicts what you're
Yeah.
talking about. In October, I was visiting a friend. I live in Ohio. Friend lives in Michigan. Her family has a lake house up there. So I went up to stay at the lake house with her, and it was a beautiful October. So I got on the water, and I had decided I was going to kayak around the lake. I was going to make a whole loop around the lake because I was like, I've never really fully explored this whole lake. I've been there a few times, but I've never really explored the whole thing myself. And my friend Allison was just going to sit there and read. And so I didn't have my phone, I'm just in a bathing suit with my kayak and I'm going. And I noticed that there's this like little crevice thing over here. And I was like, ooh, I didn't even know this was over here. Let me go explore it. And so I kept going, and then there was a tunnel, and I kept going, and then there was like this little tunnel to a whole larger lake, and I couldn't even see the end anymore. And I was like, I was determined to explore this entire lake, and this is far more than I bargained for. But I was like, okay, I'm going because this is exciting. And as I got further and further away, I noticed that I was getting scared, and I had this beautiful moment where I was able to like actually love that I was scared because I knew it was trying to tell me something. And then as I dropped in and like, okay, let's lean in. What is this fear really about? I don't do a lot of things by myself because I'm always concerned about everyone else. So when I have gone to the lake house before, I never explored this part of the lake because there was always a group of us there, and I was with my ex-husband. And so I was so concerned about what everyone else was doing, and I didn't want to miss out, and I want to make sure everyone was okay. And I'm playing like, you know, caretaker, but also like um, just afraid to do something like that on my own. And I was like, wow, what a like how many things have I might have missed out on because I was afraid to go exploring or do something new. And I got to explore like that. This is the story I call how I accidentally kayaked 4 miles. Like that's what ended up happening is I got to see this beautiful like these beautiful houses and this beautiful like animals and trees, and there's like little island in the middle of the lake and all kinds of stuff that I got to see in such a beautiful time. And then like I also had this breakthrough around fear, um, of like doing things because I chose to do what I wanted, and I actually sensed my body's yes and no. And at a certain point I had to stop and say, if I don't turn around, I won't have the muscles to get back. So I cannot explore the entire lake today, and that's okay. And I got to change what I was doing
Yeah.
because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's a lot of what trips us up from doing things that are new. Is like I don't know, and I can't plan for all the things. Well, the thing is, you can change your mind, and that's the beauty of being able to do what we want to do and explore and meander. Is like you can always just change it.
That's so funny. Um, what came to mind when you were telling that story too is that like I realize I have similar meanderings, but they look a little bit different. They're usually like I'm out running and it's like I'm on mile 13 and I'm like, let's see if I can get to like 18 or 20 today, and it just becomes like this long thing, and then I'm out and I'm like, wow, I gotta get back. So it's definitely one of those things. But what's interesting too, and what piques my curiosity is these breakthrough moments, right? Like what I like to call like going beyond what you know. They're very characteristic, right? They have very unique qualities. Like describe to us like what when we go past the point of the known and we're in that unknown, like describe that juiciness to us. Like what's that look like as far as just like what's it look like? Describe it.
So when you are new to these breakthroughs, they seem very scary. And it is like terrifying, and I'm a crier, so I cry a lot. So I'm like, I don't want to cry for hours. Um, and so it's it's a it will take longer when you are first getting into this space, generally because you're probably resisting. That's
Mm-hmm.
at least that was my experience. I would often resist my breakthroughs, and that actually drags them out longer when you do that rather than surrendering and moving with the flow of what is actually happening. And what I have like the more that I have these breakthroughs, the more that I actually get excited about them because I know what comes on the other side of that. So on the other side of that fear was a beautiful new understanding of myself. And like I was so excited about the journey I had just taken that like I got like I don't know. I bet there's scientifically something that happens in our body with like chemical levels, but I had like this rush of joy and like endorphins going through my body because I realized something new about myself, and it was so exciting, and I was like so excited to journey back, but then also to like, and I played the whole way back. Like in that tunnel that I described, it was metal. So I just started making sounds because it echoed really funny, and
Yeah.
because of the water and the metal, it was amazing. So rather than, trying to be quiet because who knows who's around, I just played around with it and made all kinds of noise. And I played with how fast and slow I was going, and I just had a really good time with
Mm.
myself, which was like a new thing. Like I have always been a person who like I don't want to do anything by myself. But like I had a good time with myself, and then I was really excited to be able to share that experience with my friend when I got back. And so that shift of like I don't know, because now I'm less scared about doing things out of the norm as a result of
Mm.
that. I still come up to resistance and there's still something to move through, but
Yeah.
there's a significant shift in my mindset around it, and there's so much juiciness there, like you used the word to describe it. And there's nothing like it. There's an energy that comes with that that's not like any other.
I think we get to rewind a little bit and go to the other side of the equation, right? Like the breakup side, because what I'm starting to see and the conversation of resistance is what really just triggered this thought. And I thought to myself, well, resistance is interesting because a lot of times I've seen this in myself, like thinking that we can stay in a relationship and change a person, or resisting making the choice we know we need to make for fear of the unknown, right? When in actuality, it's kind of like a workout, right? It's like you don't necessarily want to work out, but when you're done working out, you know that you're going to feel amazing. I feel like that's very similar to the breakthrough, right? It's like it's scary as fuck. You're not sure what it's going to look like on the other side, but when you do it, a lot of times, it may take a little bit, depending on what the situation is. But when you get through it, it's like this great expanse and this great unknown. And the more that you get used to understanding that arc and getting through whatever breakthrough it is and getting on the other side, you realize the freedom in it. But getting there, right? Like the resistance that keeps people places longer. When you're working with folks or what you've seen, what do you think is some of the most common forms of resistance of not being able to let go of something that we know we should let go of, and why we hold on longer?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, resistance can look like a lot of things. Resistance can look like avoidance, um, binge watching TV because you don't want to do something, or even doing something that looks productive, but you're really avoiding the thing that you know you should be doing. Um, that is a lot of what resistance can look like. Um, and then what do people do? Um, I think a lot of it too is not being aware of the resistance. Because the moment that I become aware that I'm resisting, I'm able to name it and then choose, consciously choose to avoid it or consciously choose to do it, which can be in and of itself its own thing. But there's something different that happens when you make those conscious choices. And until you understand that that's what's happening, it feels like garbage. Like the resistance is always like this space of like almost limbo or like confusion, and there's a lot of emotions, and instead of like dropping in, you're just kind of like hazily walking around without clarity about something that you're bound for a breakthrough.
Yeah. You know, the reason I'm smiling too is just because like resistance is so funny. Like it's oftentimes cloaked in familiar behaviors. I mean, it
Mm.
usually is. Like we usually know our resistance. And we can get caught in these loops, right? And we can almost talk ourselves into like, well, you know, I'll do it tomorrow. I've had clients that, you know, one guy whose divorce was up in the air for like 19 years, no joke, literally. And then we worked together for 8 weeks and finalized the whole thing. And it wasn't specifically about that. That was just one thing that was holding him back from doing some other things. But it's just so interesting, the narratives that keep us in these loops of resistance. And when we can start to see them, how it can be very simple, not always easy emotionally or even on the exterior, right? Like moving pieces that are very complex to shift, right? But when we do it, it's so liberating. So, like, do you have a process that you work with people as far as helping them see their blind spots in a way, or see those behaviors that are the predecessor to resistance, or understanding how to like identify the steps, or is there a predictability to it even? Let us understand like what that looks